But I want to thank Claire for hosting us tonight, and the folks here at the Phoenix Council and Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations. It's a great honor to be here. I'm based in Washington, D.C. As Claire said, I'm the Director for Human Rights and Democracy at the McCain Institute. And I've been with the Institute just over 8 years, almost a decade. But previous to that, as Claire said, I worked at the International Republican Institute that Senator McCain chaired for more than 25 years. So I've been sort of in this McCain world for my whole career. So it's a real honor to be out here in Arizona. Just a quick thanks also to Laura Thornton and our partners at Alliance for Securing Democracy, who's our other partner on this program. You'll hear from her about what they're doing to protect the United States from foreign interference in our elections in other ways. I'm just going to say a few words and then introduce our guests. We are the McCain Institute, so we are inspired by Senator McCain and his family. Their long legacy, working in promoting democracy and leading not only in the United States, but also Arizona. It's a very special place, obviously, for Senator McCain. He started his career here. His roots are here, his family's here. So it's really important that we carry on his legacy. And that includes working on democracy issues, not only around the world, but here in the United States and in Arizona. But the reason why we're here today is really to talk about this issue of foreign interference in our elections, in our own democracy, because it is real, it is a real threat. It's something that I know is in a lot of headlines, but also maybe not understood as much. And I think we have a great panel here today to talk about what China's doing, what Russia's doing, what Iran's doing. There are a lot of ways that these people on the panel are protecting all of us every single day from foreign interference that you don't even think about it. So, I want to get started, but I also want to say a special thanks to our funder on this is the Knight Foundation. They've helped the McCain Institute get started in promoting democracy and start this series on dialogues on democracy. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panel tonight. For our folks in Arizona, you might know a lot, these the two people next to me. We have Tim Romer. He's the Director for Homeland Security. You started with Governor Ducey several years ago, but also started at the CIA. So your career has led you to where you are today, not only talking about elections, but also just protecting Arizona from a lot of other issues that we're all dealing with today, whether cybersecurity or other issues. Next to Tim, we have Bill Gates. Sorry, I've got to get my breath. Bill Gates, who's the chairman of Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. We're lucky to have Bill today. Has a long history, served two terms in Maricopa County. For the folks tuning in, Maricopa County is one of the largest counties in America. Over 2 million voters. I don't know exactly how many people are living in Maricopa County. 4.5 million people in this county. So it's a large population, not only overseeing elections, but so many other municipal issues going on. So you're not only, we talk about, many different hats. Bill Gates is wearing many different hats on a regular basis. And then finally, we have Laura Thornton. Laura and I have a shared passion and professional history working in the international field. She's now with the Alliance for Securing Democracy as the director, which is part of the German Marshall Fund. Spent more than 2 to 3 decades in the international democracy field, working for the National Democratic Institute and the Swedish-based International IDEA, a Swedish think tank, also working on international democracy issues. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'm glad the microphone's working a little bit better for me. But we're gonna kick it off with some general questions about Arizona and what's going on here. Earlier this month, the FBI warned about Russia and China and other authoritarian actors attempts to promote misinformation about the integrity of American elections. They had raised concerns about the upcoming midterms and the 24 general election cycles. Are you worried about, foreign actors' continued attempt to influence Arizona's elections? And maybe, Bill, we might want to turn to you first as, someone on the front lines at the county level. But, as we've talked about, Maricopa County is one of the largest counties in America. Arizona obviously is at the center of election discussion in this country. So we'd love to get your thoughts on this important issue about, sort of foreign influence in county elections.
Well, thanks for having me, and thrilled to be a part of this discussion this evening. We are, as you mentioned, we're actually in 50 lines of business at the Board of Supervisors. But as I say, we're now famous or infamous for elections, depending upon what your view might be. So at Maricopa County, the Board of Supervisors, there's 5 of us. 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat, along with our county recorder, Stephen Richer, who's here. We're responsible for running the elections in Maricopa County, the 4th largest county in the country. And I'm thrilled that we're here to talk about sort of the international piece of this, because I think it is extremely important and has probably been underreported as this has become such a big discussion over the last couple of years. So as the 4th largest county in the country that has been in the news quite a bit, and Tim could tell you about this a lot better than I could, we are literally under attack on a daily basis. And, we're not going to get into the details of the cyber attacks. So those are real sort of in the cyber world. But I would argue as well that we are under attack with words. And that's happened. And this is what I think is the important piece of it, is that unfortunately, these international actors who would like to create instability are being aided and abetted by Americans. And that's why we're here today. That's why this is such an important discussion. This is what I would say for people. I'm going to give some straight talk. Can I say that? Absolutely. I'm going to give some straight talk here. If you are espousing the same talking points on Twitter as Vladimir Putin, you're saying the wrong things. I'm a Republican, and sadly, there are Republicans on Twitter every day espousing Vladimir Putin's talking points. And a lot of it does relate to elections. These folks, like Russia, like Iran, they benefit from instability. And this is a dream scenario for our enemies, and that's what they are. It is a dream scenario to literally have Americans fighting Americans over what? Who wins elections? This is absurd, and that's why we, Mr. Richer, and my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors have been focused on the last 2 years on fighting misinformation and getting the truth out there.
Laura, I'm just going to turn it over to you, because Bill said a couple of things in there about misinformation and politicians and others, spewing basically Russian lines from Putin on social media and other ways. And you've written about this very recently. So I'd like you to kind of, talk about, what you've written and what Alliance for Securing Democracy is doing about this.
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for having us here, the Alliance for Securing Democracy. I'm thrilled to be here. Yeah, we at the Alliance for Securing Democracy, we really look at the sort of the full playbook of autocratic threats, non-kinetic threats. So we like to look at them across silos. How does information operations, malign finance, cyber, emerging tech, these are tools that autocrats use around the world to undermine our democracies. And so our goal is really, how do we mitigate, deter, build defenses against? And what Bill said is absolutely right. So what we're seeing, and there's sort of several objectives of different autocrats. I mean, sometimes the objective is on a specific issue. So for example, Russia is very much interested in influencing our opinion on Ukraine. So the article I wrote about recently was using a tool that we've developed called the Midterms Monitor, which is tracking all the candidates for office in the US, along with local media, along with foreign actors, and seeing where these things sort of blend and bleed together. And it was really alarming to see how many candidates for our federal Congress, so these are not state level actors, but congressional candidates are repeating Kremlin talking points. Of course, some of it is more the America first, let's keep the financing at home, it's too expensive to support Ukraine. But other talking points are Ukrainians are Nazis, Putin is the victim, Crimea was Khrushchev's bargain. This is verbatim talking points from the Kremlin. These are not homegrown opinions. These are adapted there. So that can be one goal of foreign or domestic autocratic actors, a specific issue. Hopefully the goal would be to change congressional decision-making in US foreign policy. Another goal, which Bill talked about, is just chaos and distrust. Let's just sow distrust in democracy. Let's undermine it at every cost. And in this case, we're doing the work ourselves. I mean, the call is coming from inside the House. So Russia's work is really easy. It's just throw a little lighter fluid on this fire and just amplify it. So we do see them weighing in on issues like the so-called big lie and stolen elections, but even drop boxes and ballot mobile boxes and all the talking points that we hear domestically. And if you think that they don't get involved in very local issues, I'm here sadly to tell you they do. School board elections, talking about critical race theory or Black Lives, whatever it is. China is also a very interesting actor who normally is less involved in the nitty gritty of our domestic politics and more about promoting China. China has long-term global ambitions to serve as an alternative governance model. But actually, even China, in this case, we've been seeing have copied a little bit of the Kremlin playbook and is starting to dip their toe more into this domestic political narratives, which they're not quite as savvy at, but they're starting, like defund the FBI and some other things. So yeah, the playbook is definitely taking advantage of our own weakness. And just, I've obviously several things to say about this, but one thing that I think is really important to keep in mind is it's hard to distinguish between foreign and domestic. We can't draw neat borders around it. They bleed together, and it's not a helpful lens to look at this problem. So I look at it as autocratic actors working together. Second point, they are working together. Autocrats and strongmen are forming alliances. They're sharing tactics. They are feeding one another, from Viktor Orban in Hungary to Xi Jinping communicating with the Kremlin. They're working in cahoots. Third, they are innovative, particularly Russia. So their information operations are manipulating our emotions. They are funny memes. They are TikTok videos. They are getting into sort of creative content and innovation. And we're out there with 10-point fact sheets. So it's an asymmetrical battle here. I think we need to up our game in many ways, but we can talk about solutions in another round.
And I think that's a good segue to Tim, the way that you described they're changing the rules of the game. I think over the past decade, we're seeing, foreign influence campaigns take a very different route than we were all used to, or maybe not even used to. We just thought the Soviet Union was the big bad, adversary, and we could keep them at bay. But, with the advent of the internet and, social media, it's a different story. And I think, Tim, you can talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, talk about wearing many hats, as the head of Homeland Security for the state of Arizona. You're not just worried about elections, you're worried about immigration and the border and so many other different things. But, can you describe sort of on a day-to-day basis what you're doing as the chief security officer of this state to protect Arizonans from foreign adversaries?
Yeah, absolutely. So
I think,
I'll borrow that too, because I don't think these are working. First off, I just have to say, after those first two responses, I am absolutely honored to be sharing the stage for this panel with you two, because ditto with several fantastic points that were just made. And thank you to PCFR for hosting this event. I think it's one thing to host events, but it's nothing without the attendees. For you all to attend and to care about these issues, and for everybody who's watching online, that's what makes it worthwhile for each and every one of us. And I think I can probably speak for us when I say our jobs are extremely stressful. You described some of my roles, running cybersecurity, overseeing border security and things like that for Arizona. Yeah, they're stressful days, but I think at the end of the day, choosing good over evil, picking, what's right versus wrong over politics, following Senator McCain's leadership and trying to as best as we can on a daily basis, those are things that make this all worthwhile. So I just have to tell you up front that despite all of the challenges that we are faced with as a state and as a nation, we're gonna get through this. The United States is still by far the greatest country to ever exist, but that's why these authoritarian regimes are after us. It's because of that success that they want to erode it. I think for me, one of the scariest things is watching it switch from a domestic sort of misinformation campaign, which is, misinformation happens. It's the disinformation that's being done on purpose to spread the misinformation, the choosing partisan lines over country first. That's extremely frightening. So Chairman Gates had said it really well, and I'll kind of paraphrase, put this into my own words, which is, I think Russia's invasion of Ukraine is the most important thing to happen in the world since 9/11. And there are several people in this country who have decided that they're going to root for our enemy to make the current party in power look bad. And they think that's a successful strategy for the nation. And it's not. That is not country first. We should be rallying around the United States and our allies now more than ever before and working together because of this and not letting it us farther apart. So the challenges that we see on a daily basis, that change of misinformation to disinformation. I think what I saw in the news last night is very timely, which is Iran giving weapons and drones to be used in Ukraine to take human life. And that shows this good versus evil. It shows exactly what we're up against. And we knew it was going to happen. But we're seeing it happen firsthand. We know our enemies are collaborating together, and we need to do the same, but we need to come together sometimes just as our own Americans to be able to fight back and to be able to stand up to this unacceptable behavior. What's concerning for me, though, is Russia can invade a sovereign nation and cross a physical border, but in modern times and modern warfare, cybersecurity knows no borders. So the attackers that are coming after Maricopa County, they don't have to bring tanks to the Arizona border to do it. We don't have to see the buildup. We know it's happening. They're coming at us from far away. It's also incredibly concerning that, like, from my background, there's covert influences that are out there that I've learned about. I worked at an agency that taught us a lot about these types of things, but this is not even covert anymore. This is just completely overt. They're just openly doing these types of things, and we can't let them get away with it. Our number one priority, to kind of get to your question, is so when we see these concerns, cybersecurity attacks, because there's no borders, our number one priority is helping our locals. Because as a state, we feel like the locals. And I have to say, phenomenal partnership with the federal government when it comes to securing elections, working with CISA, working with FBI, working with the Secretary of State, 15 county recorders and elections directors. But I think what we really need to do is step up and put our money where our mouth was. And Governor Ducey's leadership showed that. He invested, with the support of the Arizona legislature, $10 million for our cybersecurity grant program. And what I said to everybody involved in this was, cybersecurity is a 365-day-a-year, 24/7 job. You can't just show up. And I learned this a couple of years ago, meeting with great county recorders. They said, you all are coming in with your great hashtag Protect 2020. But for us, it's just a normal day at work. So can you hashtag just protect elections, every day of the year? And we thought, wow, that's a great point. So 2020 came and went. But what we decided to do was invest in locals, because if you can shore up cybersecurity defenses, and what's happening is these nation states, they don't want to fight fair, right? Because this is war. So they're not coming after like the NSA and CIA, although they are. They're coming after like Graham County, Gila County, Maricopa County for sure. But Maricopa County is going to have defenses up here, and our rural counties are down here. So the priority was build up the cybersecurity capabilities at the local level who are most vulnerable, because we understand that the attackers want to kind of breed that discontent. They want to go after the integrity of our democracy. They think that if they can go after one county that runs an election and mess up one thing, they could deface one website. They don't have to change a vote. You deface one website in rural Arizona, and then you spread that around, and people will lose faith in the democracy. That's the scariest part about it. That's why I think we have to continue to be prepared to fight this battle all day, every day, in every single county. We can't just focus at a big national level and a big state level. We got to really partner together at the local level. And sometimes that means, putting funding towards the resources, sharing threat information, and coming together for events like this.
Thanks for that. painting a really I don't want to say scary picture, but a very realistic picture that I think, most Americans don't really appreciate. Our elected officials and non-elected officials, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to protect just us in general, but our election systems. And to pull on a point and pull on a thread that you were talking about, it comes back to the local level. I think so many of us are always focused on national elections, presidential elections. Yes, we're now focused much more on midterm elections. But as we're seeing, as we've talked, and Laura was talking about school board elections, county elections, these are becoming much more, I don't say much more important, but much more of a focal point for people. But it is the basis of democracy in this country. If we don't have a functioning school board, if we don't have a functioning city hall or county, then it's a bottom-up approach. Then we're going to have a dysfunctional national system. So I want to thank you all for the jobs that you do every single day, just to keep, our democracy actually functioning, which leads my question to you, Bill. I mean, you've been in municipal government, county government, municipal government for almost 2 decades now. I know probably 2 years ago, you didn't think you were going to be on the front page of any, the New York Times or, yes, of course, the Arizona Republic, but the New York Times was not probably, maybe a goal. I know from our organizational standpoint, anytime there's a front page story on us, we're like, oh, we don't want to be there. But for you, I mean, I don't want to say it's for a good reason, but in your leadership as Maricopa County board chair, where do you see, we're 3 weeks out from an election. This is obviously a focal point of your job right now. Can you just give us a bit of a preview of what voters in Maricopa County should expect?
Well, again, I've got a great partner over here who's working night and day on this as well, Stephen Richer. But it is, this is the thing, first of all, is we're very proud of the way we run elections here in Maricopa County. We have a true hybrid system. It's Burger King, was it? Do it your way, have it your way. You like to vote in your robe. I call it vote in your robe, vote by mail. You can do that. You want to vote early before election date, but in person, you can do that. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way and show up on election day and go in there with your kids, you can do that as well. So that's the way that it's been now for several cycles. Some people have tried to raise questions about vote by mail. And again, that's about sowing distrust and doubt and misinformation. I'm not here to talk about Pennsylvania, who maybe in 2020, it was, this was newer for them. Here in Arizona, we've been doing vote by mail since the 90s. And without boring you with all the details and all the checks and balances, we have many ways to protect the integrity of the system. And one of the things that's most important that I want people to understand is it's not a bunch of faceless bureaucrats who are running these elections. There are a few faceless bureaucrats, me, no. But we have our neighbors, your neighbors, 3,000 people, right, Stephen, who are coming in, your family members, your friends. They come down. They're Republicans, they're Democrats, they're Libertarians, they're Independents. We're all working on this together. And so I want people to know that these are the people who are helping to run the election, and they have eyeballs on one another. But look, if you've watched TV at all in the last few weeks, you know that the eyeballs of the world are on Arizona right now. I can tell you, just in the past few months, I've been interviewed by reporters from the UK, Australia, Germany, Denmark, France, and they don't want to talk about Maricopa County Animal Care and Control, okay? They're here to talk about elections. And this is the important point that I want everyone to keep in mind who's watching this. I know we're scared about our country. I'm confident, just like Tim, because of great partnerships like we have with the governor. I'm confident, but we are concerned about our democracy. But guess what? The rest of the world is watching. So if we think this is about just about us, it's not. It's about the rest of the democracies in the world, which are unfortunately under attack in a way that they haven't been for decades. And so if they look at us and say, well, you know what, this whole experiment that the founders started, it really doesn't work. Guess what? They're going to start to question democracy in Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East. My wife and I, we have 3 daughters. Our 3rd daughter joined us a few years ago from Uganda. And for those of you who know Ugandan politics, you know about their leader, Museveni. Not exactly a Democrat, small d, okay? And when she came to us back in 2019, she would talk about what was going on there, the misinformation, the disinformation. And you know, my wife and I looked at each other like, well, that'll never happen in the US. She has said to us in the last couple of years, I've seen this before. I recognize what's going on. So we have to understand that connection. But I have confidence that we're going to run a great election here in Maricopa County and across the country. And we can start to turn that corner and bring that confidence back. Because I want to be clear, we've had people questioning our elections from across the political spectrum. It's not just Republicans. It's been on both sides of the aisle. And I'm all for asking questions and raising doubts. But once we answer those questions, then people need to acknowledge that and give confidence back to the people.
Bill, thanks for that. And, you know, there's so many things that we could talk about from that statement, but I want to link it to Laura. You know, one thing you said about your daughter from Uganda, you know, I spent a lot of time in sub-Saharan Africa and, you know, been around the world as has Laura. And I think a lot of our friends from around the world have said, just wait, you know, it's going to happen to you, or, you know, wait, you know, what's happening there could happen here. And we're like, no, it can't happen. We have too many, you know, we have trust in the system. I think in my previous career, a lot of people saying, well, how do elections just work in the United States? And it's like, for the most part, they work. You know, there's trust in the system, inherent trust. And a lot of that has been eroded over the past few years. But Laura, I'd like to hear, you know, obviously from your experiences, but from, you know, the perspective of Alliance for Security and Democracy, what you're seeing, you know, around the world, and in how, you know, we can learn.
No, that's a good question. I mean, unfortunately, I wish I was a bearer of better news. I'm normally a very optimistic person, but in my previous work at International IDEA, we do these global state of democracy reports where we look at the world and we talk about the health of democracy. And probably as no surprise to anyone here, unfortunately, we are in a period of backsliding. I do want to put that in perspective. Still, just over a majority of people today do live in democracies, which is a huge improvement if you compare it to 1975. So we're on the right trajectory. We're having a serious decline. And it really, what I find really interesting is that it sounds the same, no matter where I've lived. You could listen to a focus group. I used to live in Georgia, the country in the former Soviet Union. I also lived in Cambodia and Thailand. And you could listen to people talking there or in Georgia or in Poland or in Arizona, and you could hear some of the same complaints. And it mostly is related to the failure of democracy to deliver. People feel that there's growing inequity, that the system benefits the powerful or is corrupted either through actual illegal corruption or through, I would say, a rather grotesque political finance system where they feel left out. And you hear that same phrase over and over, it's, I'm not represented. I don't have my voices heard. The elites have captured the system. And this creates just a beautiful vacuum for illiberal strongmen to step in and be like, I have the answer to your problem. I am the Robin Hood. I will drain the swamp. I will fix it. I will get rid of this. And this is something that's very appealing, and it's human nature. And one of their favorite tools is using disinformation to sow more fear, more grievance, more distrust. That is the formula. And unfortunately, we're seeing this jumping from place to place, and it is contagious. And it does matter if America is experiencing an isolationist period or a backsliding of our own democracy. It sends a signal to our allies. It sends a signal outside. This I lost, therefore it was stolen is literally the new black. I hear this all over. You can hear these words from Myanmar to Bolsonaro to Victor, and this is an export that I'm not particularly proud of. So we do have big impact. But on, what we've learned is one thing I would like to, just to keep it simple, one thing that I would love that we did a little bit more of is practice what we're preaching. So I worked for a democracy organization like Paul, where, we would talk about principles of democracy, and we would talk, for example, about the importance of having your constituencies drawn up in a nonpartisan way. Some countries use computers, and we would preach about the importance of, having election management bodies that were completely removed from partisan interests. And we would preach about the value of one person, one vote. All these things that we've actually don't necessarily practice super well ourselves. So it always put me in a little bit of an uncomfortable position at times, because I would feel that we were contradicting the advice that we gave others. But I also think there are bright lights that we can learn from other places. I just got back from Helsinki, and in Finland, they're working on a whole of society approach to build community resilience. And it really is involving, when they say whole of society, they mean it. It's like the military, teachers, civil servants, students. And it's a comprehensive program that includes media literacy, civic education, mandatory civil service, a depolarization exercises and summer camps. They're doing all these activities because they realize the best defense against autocratic threats is human resilience. And that has to happen at the individual level, the community level, the national level. And so I think Americans are getting to the place where we like being a teacher, not a student, but I think we're in a place where we're kind of looking up over the ponds and going, hey, what can we learn over there? And I love that, because I do think that we need to share best practice. Just as we have a lot to teach the world, they have a lot to teach us. And I think we can learn from, best practice in election observation, for example, which is something that's used, nonpartisan election observation, which is used around the world. We can learn from countering disinformation tactics that have been used around the world. And so I'm hoping that we can build more of that community, like you had mentioned, within the United States, but also with our democratic allies overseas.
What's interesting that you mentioned Finland. I mean, I think we've seen the Prime Minister of Finland quite a bit on the news lately. I mean, talk about a country who's literally on the front lines against Russia, and not a big population and one of the longest borders with Russia. And if they can come together in kind of against one adversary, Russia, then maybe we can learn a little bit something from them.
Or learn from our Ukrainian friends. About preempting, pre-bunking, and predicting information operations.
Yeah. I mean, we could have a whole discussion on Ukraine and what we can learn from Ukraine, because I think, I'm sort of jealous. My colleagues here are wearing the U.S. and the Ukrainian flag together, and I don't have that. And if Senator McCain were still with us, he'd be wearing that as well, because if there was one champion in this country who really championed the cause of Ukraine, it was Senator McCain. So we're doing the right thing now by Ukraine, but we can learn a lot. And this is where the rubber meets the road as far as democracy versus authoritarianism in the world. So very much supportive of what we're doing and what the United States is doing to support Ukrainian democracy, because they're defending democracy for all of us in many ways. But Tim, I want to kind of bring it back to Arizona. We can talk about more international things, but about best practices, about cybersecurity. Is Arizona, obviously it's in a good place, but what are you learning more from the federal government or other states that are having similar issues? I mean, where is, as Laura was talking about, countries learning from countries, are we learning from other states and what they're doing to protect, election security and other measures that you're dealing with?
Yeah, so I'll never say we don't have all the answers, but I feel a heck of a lot better about where we are as a state from a cyber resiliency perspective sitting here today than I did, 3-4 years ago. The way we did it in our playbook was, I'll just be really candid. When the governor asked me what we should do, I said point blank, you go and you look at what the task force recommendations were out of the cities with the largest data breaches. So we had the state of South Carolina get hit. Their Department of Revenue got hit, $27 million data breach that it cost the state of South Carolina. Every single tax information, Department of Revenue data was lost. The city of Baltimore got hit really bad, about $18 million. And then even about 2 years ago, city of Atlanta. And I said, well, these local governments within the United States have already been hit. Just figure out what to do to prevent it. And we do it proactively. I don't think it's rocket science. So we looked at it and it was invest in your workforce, make cybersecurity a priority. They started mandating cyber awareness training for their employees. And I said, well, let's do that today. And so the first thing we did is we did that. We mandated cybersecurity awareness training. I said that we grew our team from 16 cyber analysts working in the state of Arizona just to protect the executive branch. So the executive branch protects 7.5 million Arizonans' data, ADOT information, your tax ID, your healthcare information, you name it. And I said we grew our team from 16 to 36,000, and we did it without any additional taxpayer dollars because I already had the licenses for cybersecurity awareness training. It was just nobody was mandating that you had to take it. I had a couple agencies who said, yes, you have to take it. Like our agency at the Department of Administration did at the time, but the other agencies weren't doing it. So it started simple. The fact is that 84% of worldwide cybersecurity incidents, 84% are caused by human error. So we think of cybersecurity as this, it's so complex and sophisticated, and Russia and China are coming after us with everything they've got. We don't stand a chance. The truth is, yes, we do, because most of it is actually human error. So we've got to raise the bar of our weakest links. We need strong passwords. We need good cyber hygiene. I need employees to not click on phishing emails, which I can say we started phishing our employees every single month instead of once a year. We tracked the metric. The metric was a 14% click rate of employees of the state of Arizona clicking on phishing emails. We've got it down to 4% now. So that's a huge step in the right direction. And then so what we said is we need to give that same cybersecurity awareness training, those phishing tools and everything else to our local counties, because there's a lot of counties around the state that didn't have it. And we know that they're a target for everything, not just on elections, but physical security, critical infrastructure, and all of that. So it's actually simpler than people give it credit for on cybersecurity. It does take some investment. We built the facility. We built the Cyber Command Center to be an operations center, to be a hub, to bring agencies together. So the National Guard team co-locates with my team. The governor brought my team over from the Department of Administration to the Department of Homeland Security when I became director. It puts us in a much more respectful, powerful position. You picked the term for it, but I will tell you right now, my team and I have much more credibility on cybersecurity within the state, speaking from the Department of Homeland Security, than we did speaking from the Department of Administration. And I spoke with the head of the Department of Administration at a cybersecurity awareness event earlier this morning, and we still laugh about it because you have to. I mean, he's a good friend of mine, and it's no offense to the Department of Administration, but when you come in and you say, hey, I'm from the Department of Administration, we need to talk cybersecurity, it's a little different, the responses you get, than, hi, you know, I'm the director of Homeland Security for the state of Arizona. When you just talk cybersecurity, I mean, you get a much better response. We've got state agencies to adopt cybersecurity tools that the state is paying for, I think mainly because the governor elevated our team. He made cybersecurity part of Homeland Security. And so when I travel on this issue, and I was just meeting with all 50 heads of cybersecurity for all the states in Louisville, Kentucky last week, we talked about this, and it was amazing how many people in the room said, my governor's office is starting to ask questions about Arizona. And the whole reason is that the governors are talking, and they realize that if you want to elevate cybersecurity, it starts by elevating the roles of who runs cybersecurity in your state. So the governors of New York and Ohio now have elevated their heads of cybersecurity, not to be directors of Homeland Security, but they now have oversight of the entire state. So I think the best practices are that make cybersecurity part of Homeland Security. Start with the simple things, you know, get your workforce good, you know, cybersecurity practices. And then we get into the more advanced tools. Now with the $10 million of grant funding, we can do some pretty cool things. And people want to jump into artificial intelligence. But what we always said is, man, I can give artificial intelligence to a certain organization, but they don't even have like basic password security. So, I mean, like AI is really not going to do them much help when all their employees are clicking on phishing emails and using the same password for their Chick-fil-A app and their HBO Go account and their state of Arizona address. And I say that and you guys all chuckle, but like, imagine how stressful my job is, because one night I get this call, and it's my deputy director. And he said, hey, this cybersecurity firm, I'll leave the name out, just alerted us. And of course, the firms are really good at this. At the time, we were not paying for something called dark web recon. I mean, it sounds really cool, right? Like Chris Hemsworth definitely is like playing, you know, this role in a movie. So dark web recon is what you usually pay for to have a service search keywords and algorithms and everything else to try to find, like, is there a state of Arizona? Is there a Maricopa County email address, account password, anything else up for sale on the dark web? How do we find it and close it off before a bad guy finds it and gets their way in? And they said, there's one up for sale for $5, and it's an HBO Go account. And the HBO Go account user used their state of Arizona email address as the username. And now we're concerned because they're saying whatever the password is up for sale, it's probably the same password to get into the state of Arizona. And we said, oh my God, okay. So we immediately notified the agency and we're like, guys, what are the chances that it's the same password? And everybody was like, oh, I don't know, like 60, 40, everything else. I was like, let me tell you, it was the same password. We forced password reset the person overnight. That person came into work the next morning, couldn't get into their computer, got a nice visit from, you know, their IT team saying, hey, you know, this happened. So what we learned from it is definitely pay for, you know, dark web recon was a good thing. Also educate our employees that you don't reuse all the same passwords, because what hackers do, they go after the most vulnerable account out there. And then once they get that, they just run that against all your other accounts. So those are some of the lessons learned. I mean, those are some of the best practices. Some of it's not rocket science, but we're going to start simple and then we're going to build our way up. And then we get into some really cool things that we talk to, you know, I was at the University of Advancing Technology, this hidden gem in Tempe, Arizona recently, talking with their students, and they're researching all these really cool, fascinating ways to run cybersecurity tools and modernizing the way that we defend against it. But in order to do so, we first had to put ourselves in a lot better position to be able to, you know, as an organization, to be able to kind of respect the threat and to kind of give ourselves a fighting chance.
After you talk, I get scared every single time. I need to reset my passwords because they're pretty much all the same. I shouldn't say that out loud. Kidding. I've got a long flight back to Washington, all those things. In a few minutes, we'd love to take some questions from the audience, but I want to just, you know, one thing that I'm concerned about, and I want to turn to Bill about, and Tim mentioned this, you know, none of it, and what you do, what we do is done without a team, right? You talked about it, and Bill, you talked about it, you know, on a daily basis. But I would like, you know, it's for the audience, and, you know, I don't think this gets old. about the people who run our elections. To me, they are the frontline defenders of democracy. You know, I go into the same polling station in McCain, Virginia, with the same retirees who have been there for the past 10 years. You know, it's comforting. It's if they're different, you're like, wait, what's going on? But, you know, it's the same people. And so I'd like you to kind of talk about the people of Maricopa County, the people who are actually running these elections on a day-to-day basis. Because I know you're have many different hats, and Steve Richard over here is, you know, running around doing a lot of different things, but there are a lot of people actually doing these things, and, you know, they shouldn't have to feel threatened at the end of the day. So I think Laura's gonna.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for asking about that. And I think I'll start there with they shouldn't feel threatened. You know, the people who work in elections administration, like I said before, they're your friends, they're your neighbors, they're your grandma. My wife's grandmother worked at the polls for 35 years in Iowa, right? That's who these people are. And these people now are suffering threats on a daily basis, okay? They're being threatened via email. They're being threatened because one of the things we do, and I haven't talked about this, is transparency. For Stephen Richer and the Board of Supervisors, we want to make this the most transparent election we've ever had. Okay. And the way that we do that is by opening the doors up. We've had so many tours, people who have come in, legislators. Yeah. Tim, you came on a tour to open the doors and for people to see this. And we have a live stream, 24/7 camera. So these are all good things. But there's another side to this. That means that people can see these elections workers, good people who have committed their lives to this. And we had, during the primary election, some of the most vile emails sent to these people. They found out their names. And the things that they said in these, the emails they sent to these people were so awful, horrific. And what hurts me and hurts Stephen is that we're there, we're standing up for them every day, but there's a lot of silence in our community. And again, some more straight talk. There's silence from a lot of other politicians. There's silence from a lot of business leaders. Silence every day while this goes on. And they know it's going on. And many of these politicians know that they are feeding this fire, right? This started years ago when we talked about faceless bureaucrats, right? They're not humans. We can say these terrible things about them. And this is accelerated to the point now where elections workers are the keys. But I don't want to make this all negative, but I want you to know that there is hope. This is one of the interesting things that I've experienced is I've gone to some groups, spoken to young people, and I've had young people come up to me, some of the best and brightest in our country, and said, we're inspired by what the elections workers of Maricopa County are doing. And I'm not saying they're coming up to me saying they want to run for Board of Supervisors or that they want to run for county recorder. They want to do election security. They want to protect the election infrastructure. They want to help their neighbors vote and understand the process. And so elections administration has become, there's more focus than there's ever been before. So I'm very encouraged to see that, to see those people coming in. But please know that these are human beings that are working in our elections department. And I know no one here would do this, but when your neighbors or your family members tell you about the things they're tweeting about our colleagues, or the emails that they're sending, horrific emails, they don't deserve this. And we've got to get back to civility. It's good. It's very healthy in a democracy to have a battle, to have a debate and talk about your vision as opposed to the others. But it is completely unacceptable to dehumanize people. And that sadly has become normalized in this country. We're not talking about Uganda. We're not talking about Russia. This country, it has become normalized, and it has to stop now.
I was going to say, Lord, did you want to comment? Or
Amen.
Amen. Yeah. No, I mean, on that, when you said this has been normalized in this country, what happened when, the old normalization? I think about Senator McCain and, and I don't say the politicians of the past, but so many politicians of the past who, he was best friends with Joe Biden. He was best friends with Ted Kennedy. They fought on the floor, but then they were best friends afterwards, but they didn't agree on everything, but they were friends at the end of the day. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you're a politician. I mean, you're going to have disagreements. But at the end of the day, we're people. We're in the same community trying to do the same things. We might have a different way of getting to the same point, but I think your point's well taken. We need to get back to a point where, civility counts, civility matters. It's not a war. I mean, this is politics. But I think one thing that you kind of to bring it back a little bit back to the topic of foreign interference, all these emails, the Twitter against election workers that are going on, that's constant. This is being used by our adversaries. They are getting in there and ginning up a lot of that to kind of foment the crisis around elections in our country. So it's, yes, in our own communities we're doing that, but it is being fomented by our adversaries. They're like, let's see how we can make this worse. So there you go. Any questions from the audience? We'd love to hear from you if you have any. Well, I have to go up here first. I saw the hands up here first. I think you're gonna have to shout, and then I'm gonna restate the question for our audience.
Yes, thank you all for being very insightful. Do we have a contingency plan right now? I'm thinking about the county recorder's office and the county supervisors and the Secretary of State, people who have a hands-on role in the elections. Do we have a contingency plan in case there's any kind of instability where they're protected in all of this?
So the question is there a contingency plan for, I guess, the leadership running elections in case there is some instability?
So great question. There is. Stephen and I have been in these meetings with law enforcement, with our county sheriff. There absolutely is with our elections directors. It's, first of all, it's best practice, even if, it's all sunshine and 75 degrees, but particularly in these times. I mean, right after the election in 2020, the general election, as I've described it, McTech, where our voting goes on, it turned into Lollapalooza for the alt-right. You had Alex Jones out there. This became a dangerous situation where we had to bring fences in. We're on the phone talking to Stephen, talking to the sheriff. So the one thing I would say, sadly, is we maybe see it coming a little bit more. Again, you prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Thank you. And we had a question down here.
To hear what our plans are for public service announcements and things to anecdote the public in general about how to spot and not perpetuate disinformation.
So the question is about, basically public service announcements or public responses to stop mis and disinformation. What is the state, county, what are you trying to do to do that? But Laura, you can jump in too if there's.
I'm happy to draw a broader picture, but then we can turn to the state. I think some of the lessons that we've learned about information operations and we've come a long way, and we understand that the sort of whack-a-mole debunking doesn't necessarily work as well as we'd like. Not that it's not important to set the record straight and to correct misinformation and disinformation when it appears, but you need to get ahead of it. So I think one of the things we've learned in just looking at information influence operations is what I call the 3 Ps: preempt, prebunk, predict. Preemption is really about getting ahead of the narrative. So let's say the narrative is about Ukraine has always been Russian land. It's part of the Russian Empire, blah, blah, blah. Ukrainians were excellent at getting out with their own national narrative about Ukraine, who we are, as a democracy, as a tolerant society, and we've been here since, look at Kiev in the 1100s, and Moscow didn't exist, and this is who we are. So getting out in front. The other thing that preemption should include, and it's part of our public diplomacy as well, which is creating images and not being afraid of using emotions. So the ghosts of Kiev, that's what our adversaries do, as I mentioned, and we use 10-point fact sheets, and we need to pull on people's hearts, because this is a conversation as much about hearts as it is about minds, because facts only get us so far here. That's not really what's driving a lot of this. You can correct everyone about the elections in Arizona till it's a bottomless well. They will find a new reason. It's because it's not what they want to hear. It's about what they feel. Pre-bunk is anticipation. Okay, Russia's going to say some false flag thing. I'm going to tell the world about it before they get the chance to do it. So I'm not debunking it. Hasn't happened yet. I'm pre-bunking it. And predictive capabilities. So getting away from the narratives and focusing more on the toolkit. How can we enhance our threat intelligence? How can we think about what tools our adversaries use so that we can predict it and then again get ahead of it? So I think that these are some of the things just in terms of countering information operations that we need to sort of enhance and get better at. And in the context of an election, it would be, which I think y'all are doing, which is flooding the zone with accurate, truthful information, but also not shying away from creative, innovative, fun content to make it clickbaitable, let's say. Just one example, Russia's Sputnik RT Espanol and Sputnik Espanol have 10 times the following of Voice of America Espanol. Why? Because it's fun and it's interesting and it's clever. And so I think we need to, flood the zone. And the problem with the algorithms, of course, is that negativity and human nature, negativity rises to the top. So all the stuff we see is the bad stuff. So we need to just overwhelm it with the good. But I'll turn over to the stage.
Yeah, I'll just say that CISA, so the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency, one of the best kept secrets when it comes to Homeland Security in the United States these days. It's our youngest federal agency. It broke off from DHS to focus on cybersecurity and infrastructure. They're in a prime position to help on things like this, and they're actually doing a really good job. And the reason is that some of the other agencies have been, I'll just say, politicized in the media and other ways, and they're starting to lose some public trust and credibility, where CISA shares regularly on all election security calls with all the county recorders, leadership, elected officials, Secretary of States, and others, to be able to not only share good threat information and how we're going to, defend against it, but it's also best practices on crisis communication, emergency communication, spotting things, reporting those accounts that are not legitimate, and all those types of things. But to your question, when you talk about PSAs, it's a spot on question, because within the public safety world, we know for a fact that public panic and consumer response will be worse than any emergency actually is on the surface. So examples of this are, there's a lot of people in the room I know who have been through a DC snowstorm. The public panic and consumer response of a DC snowstorm are way worse than the actual snowstorm. Okay, you can't get anything, and then it snows like an unmeasurable amount. In the pandemic, we couldn't get toilet paper for the craziest. There's no real reason for it. It was public panic. One person somewhere had put out on social media that they couldn't get it, and then everybody rushed out. So what's going to happen is that. And quickly, I have to say, one of the worst articles I've seen recently was the Russian cyber war that wasn't. And it was like, we're in the middle of this thing, and already the media is like, well, everything that everybody warned us about Russia on cyber was false. And I was like, okay, now they haven't achieved their military objectives. This is exactly the time that they're going to look for a win and attack us from far. This is when our guard needs to be up the most. When they come at us, they're going to come after critical infrastructure. That includes healthcare and the financial systems. If they hit one bank and they take down, let's say, one of our main banks for an hour, we'll just say, somewhere in the country, take down the websites, prevent one of our main financial institutions from doing service, take down a pipeline like Colonial Pipeline went down on the East Coast. The public panic for everybody to say, oh my God, this one bank is down, it's coming. We all need to rush out and get our money out of the banks right now, or we all need to rush out and get gas. I talked with the emergency manager in Florida recently on this topic, and he said, we don't even get gas from Colonial Pipeline. None of the Colonial Pipeline gas goes into Florida, and we had gas shortages in Florida because everybody panicked. So the PSA side of it, extremely important. I think thanks to good officials and electeds, like two of them that we have here today, they're getting the word out, and we all try to get the word out. Every time we have these types of events, it's like, I know this is so much easier said than done, but it's to stay calm, have faith in the resiliency of the system, report things that you see that are false. All those types of things help. But I'll say CISA has been at least a good partner for state and locals.
And I would just add to that, for us, we have, Maricopa County used to be kind of this sleepy, level of government, did important stuff, but nobody really, they were quiet. Through all this, we have found our voice. So we've gotten very active on social media and elsewhere. Stephen and I are now doing a press conference lead up to the general election every week. So we're ready for the issues. We get up there, the room is full of the media. And again, this is a Republican saying this, but the media has actually been fantastic. The local media, they've done an incredible job of learning what's going on and amplifying it. Stephen and I can't get out there and address all these things. Although another thing that we did was we actually had a chip installed in Stephen's head. And if he thinks about a response to a tweet, it's sent. So, that's been very helpful. But in addition to that, we have found that having that local media who goes out, they respond to the misinformation. But I encourage all of you to go out there and look at the things. Memes, we need to talk. We need to work on Maricopa County memes. But and TikToks, I've got, our daughters can help me with that too. That's good. But we've gotten a little cheeky with our Twitter. For those of you who followed some of our responses to the Cyber Ninja audit, we got a little cheeky. And guess what? Some people can say they don't like it. It's not professional, but most people said, hey, I'm starting to follow Maricopa County Twitter now. This is interesting. We always stated the facts. We don't spread misinformation, but we might have a little bit of fun because we just couldn't help with the Cyber Ninjas.
One thing that I loved your comment about is, your local media, your local news stations and papers getting the information out. We haven't discussed that tonight. This is one thing. Another thing that we're very concerned about is just like local journalism and how it, underpins democracy. And, how many of you, actually subscribe to your local newspaper? It's a big deal in the United States. So we had one up here, and here. So did you? So we'll go in order. And why don't we just chunk up the questions? And so, because I know we're probably getting. Could you say that again? Sorry.
Whether it's domestic as well, or whether it's
So the question is around, cybersecurity. Yeah.
The short answer is it's coming from everywhere. We track it, but also the good attacks are spoofing their IP addresses to come through other countries. So to say that, we know it's coming from this location, on the surface, we don't. I will tell you, there are a lot of attacks coming from inside the United States. They're coming everywhere. Sometimes nation states are good about what they're doing. They're actually, spoofing IPs. Iran could be going through Europe to, come after us with botnets and things like that. But at the end of the day, sometimes they just take the gloves off. After the General Soleimani missile strike, Iran just started coming after U.S. organizations like crazy. We could see it at the state level. We actually packaged up all the intel and shared it with CISA and back to Congress. And we took that extra step to do it because we knew it was important as a state. We could actually see the attacks coming from Iranian IPs. And that's when we know, like, wow, they're really just putting everything into defacing some websites right now. They're not even spoofing the IP address. So short answer, everywhere.
When we go here and then here.
I grew up in the Civil War in Central Asia, so born and raised in Tajikistan. So one of the things that the Soviet Union faced when it fell apart was economic unrest and internal civil unrest, right? So I see the same two factors here within the US now. Economic unrest, we're not doing so great economically, and socially we're not getting along, and there's a big divide within. So, but on the other hand, Britain, our allies like Europe, is not doing that great either economically. And yet you have another superpower like China, Iran, Russia, all coming together. What are your thoughts on us, number one, maintaining our role in the world against this threat and given our internal factors? And number two, any thoughts on a potential, God forbid, hopefully never happens, civil war?
Do you want to take the international side?
Sure.
Yeah, not to throw you on the spot.
No. No, these are the things that keep us up at night. I will take that first part. So I think that we're doing better in terms of sort of revisiting our alliances and keeping them strong. And I think the Ukraine war was, I hope, a wake-up call for all of us that we need to act together. And I think it also proved, because we also know well, as you mentioned, that autocratic states are acting very much in tandem and have each other's backs and are sharing tactics. And they can hold us under tremendous blackmail. You can ask any European right now looking at the winter and what it means to be dependent on Russian oil and gas. Or, my former home, Cambodia, that was completely dependent on the PRC for its entire telecommunications and cables that provided their technologies there. So, thinking ahead about how first to decouple ourselves from economically, which is going to be a very impossible job in a lot of respects, but we're taking baby steps already in terms of making sure that we are not so susceptible to blackmail from our adversaries. Coming together and reclaiming our governance bodies. I was very pleased that the United States advocated very strongly in the ITU, which is a UN governance body over technology that we had sort of ceded to our adversaries. Serving to bolster our partners in other parts of the world and provide alternatives, because if we're not there providing democracy affirming technologies and development and aid, believe me, there are others that will fill that gap. And I would say, finally, I don't like the idea of, reverting an iron curtain. We need to support Democrats in non-democratic places. And that is the wave for change, as you probably know better than any, that the change is going to come within. I was in Indonesia when we thought Suharto would never fall, and he did, and it was because of Indonesians. And so our continued support to Democrats in tough places, if they live in Russia, if they live in China, if they live in Iran, and look at Iran, look at the desire, the human desire for democracy and freedom. And we cannot forget these people, because that is how the change is going to happen. So we need to continue to provide support to Democrats living in these difficult places, not isolate them, make sure that they're part of our partnerships and collaborations. But yeah, it is a scary road ahead that we think a lot about at the Alliance. As for civil war, I pass the buck.
Maybe.
I'll take it. I'm happy you raised this question. And this phrase of civil war we're seeing is showing up in different blogs and things like that on the right. And I think we need to look that in the face and acknowledge that this is a dangerous time in our country. And one of the reasons is we have one of the major parties that is going through an identity crisis, just like we had before the Civil War. We have great technological transformation like we had during that time as well. And we have division, but the division is different, right? That was more geographic. And I actually think that is really in our favor. We're not seeing a geographic division, although having said that, we are seeing some people starting to move, right? They're choosing literally where to live based on politics, but at least it's not totally lining up. So I think people ask that question, we need to talk about it. And who controls that? We don't have to look on the internet. We don't have to look at Belarus, Tajikistan. We need to look at ourselves. We will decide that. We will decide. And we have to stop categorizing people and putting people in groups and dividing in for short-term political gain. And it's happening all across the spectrum. And that will help move us in that direction. So we've got to pull back and we've got to be civil to one another. Thank you for the question.
Yeah. So last question. One of you.
You've spoken a lot about Russia-specific tactics and like their goals in running a faith in democracy and support for Ukraine. Could you speak more about China's efforts, their specific tactics and objectives with their disinformation campaigns?
Sure. Information operations is a big part of China's objectives. And as I mentioned, it's very calculated with a long-term vision of selling China as the alternative governance model. They don't want to be small players. They want to be the global power. And that's why they hold 4 committee chairs in the United Nations. That's why they provide heaps of aid through the Belt and Road Initiative, and then in turn blackmail countries to support them on the global stage. They're selling an image that, hey, follow us. Autocratic economic growth is the way to go. We pulled billion people out of poverty, true, and this is more efficient. We also can have a 30-year plan on economic growth and climate change. Democracies are messy, et cetera. So that is the sort of the main focus of their information operations. But they couple it really well with other forms of economic coercion. They have very successfully exported their technology to countries, as I mentioned, where, you know, an autocrat in say, Uganda is purchasing their telecoms through Huawei and purchasing surveillance technology from China so that they can suppress civil society or spy on the opposition. So that's another big tactic, and they all work in tandem. But their information operations is mostly about democracy messy, democracy bad, nightmare, look at us, economic growth, organization, and another big thing that they've loved over the last few years is COVID disinformation. And they have spread, of course, massive stories about COVID being invented at Fort Detrick in Maryland, but also how fantastic they were at a COVID response, which is not panning out so well. So yeah, their main goal is much more strategic, I think, in terms of a long-term vision, whereas Russia is more just like stink bombs everywhere and making a huge mess. China's like, this is the plan. I'm selling a whole image. That's sort of the main objective.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say that from a China perspective, what they're doing is going after intellectual property. They're targeting capitalism. They're targeting the private sector and our research universities. So they're coming after Arizona State University, University of Arizona, and others, because where all the research is being done, they want that data. We collectively have worked really hard to build that healthcare data, that engineering data, and everything else, and they want to steal it. Capitalism beats communism any day of the week. So what their strategy is actually is to just steal our private sector tools and put it to use. So that is one of the scariest things that they're doing right now. They're going after supply chains. So with microchip manufacturing growing in Arizona is not just great for Arizona, it's great for the entire United States of America. It's great for all of our Western allies, because when push comes to shove and we need microchips, we can't rely on TSMC's China facilities to produce them. We're going to need those TSMC facilities to be in the United States of America to be able to control the supply chain. So there's that side of it. And then lastly, I'll just say there is the social media side. There is TikTok, which I highly recommend against using. I really adamantly believe TikTok is a Chinese spy tool, and I'm not like a conspiracy theorist to tell you this. I use a lot of other social media, but it is absolutely there. The vulnerabilities are there. A lot of social media companies can basically prove it, and we're all kind of turning this blind eye to it. And then there's Huawei. So Huawei is a Chinese telecommunications company in quotes, but is a Chinese spy agency that has been under indictment from the Department of Justice multiple times, and they're going to continue to be indicted. But Huawei still pops up like from time to time around town and around places. So we as Americans need to be very cognizant of what they're trying to do, and they love the distraction of Russia right now. They're like, you know, look at how bad Russia is. They're doing all these horrible things. Meanwhile, they're trying to literally steal everything from the United States of America. So great question. I'm actually glad you closed with that too, because it helps bring this a lot more global.
Yeah. No, well, thank you for everyone for joining us today. And I just want to give a big round of applause to our panelists today. They were fantastic.